Congratulations, we made it. Welcome to Advanced AI Video Automation, the movie. This is going to be a transformative experience for both you and myself. We're going to be going deep on an emotional level, on a physical level, on a spiritual level, and of course, on a technical and technological level. On the internet nowadays, you're going to see this trending thing called AI slop, which in a nutshell refers to content and media, which is very clearly AI generated and very clearly lacking in any authentic emotional connection. In this video, and this is the core differentiator of this video, we're going to be presenting a way that you can use AI in a modular fashion that complements your existing media creation workflows in a very flexible manner, I would say. If you're one who wants to skip straight to the finish line, I've included all of the resources that we're going to be building step by step throughout this journey. And in a nutshell, what I've shared with you is 9 N8N workflows that do very specific things and that you can use, once again, for certain steps in your media creation process, depending on what your creative vision is. So the core message underneath this video is saving time and genuinely making better quality outputs, right? That's the core message of this video. So strap yourself in. You're going to learn an incredible amount. I'm really going all out on this one, and enjoy. And I wish nothing but the best. Blessings and health. Let's jump in. It's going to be a wild ride. Before we start building, let's take a quick look at 3 examples of what the system that we are going to create in this video is going to allow us to produce and customize. Example 1.
Here's a trick to sound 30% wittier in conversations, even if you're not that fast. When someone asks a question, don't answer it right away. Flip the frame, change how the question is seen. For example, if someone asks, "So are you finally seeing someone?" You could then say, "I see people all the time. That's how I avoid walking into them." Try this today. Don't just answer, redirect the angle. Wit isn't speed, it's misdirection. Follow for more wit training.
Example 2.
Get ready. Your brain is about to get stronger. Ready for today's wit workout. If someone says, "You're not very good at this, are you?" Quick, what's your comeback? Option A, "Well, I'm better at it than you are at being polite." Option B, "I'm practicing selective excellence." Option C, "Good enough to know when someone's fishing for attention." The truth is there is no right answer. All are valid comebacks. The key to this exercise is speed. When you're fast and precise with your responses to offensive remarks, then people will find you witty. Your challenge for the day is to practice comebacks. When someone throws shade your way, don't freeze but respond quickly. You'll get more accurate with your responses the more you practice.
Example 3.
Welcome to Wit in a Minute. Today's lesson, the art of the clever comeback. Picture this, you're at a party and someone says to you, "Wow, you look like you're enjoying yourself." You could respond with a dull, "Yep," or you could flip the flat comment on its head by replying with something like, "Wow, I'd say that's the worst opener I've ever heard." Wit is about surprise and speed. Here's your challenge. Next time someone tosses you a boring comment, flip it with a playful twist. For example, if someone says, "Nice shoes," reply with something like, "I use them to run away from bad conversations." Practice it, own it, and stay sharp. Stay tuned for more wit.
Ta-da! Let's start naturally with the table of contents or overview for what's to come. I've shared in the description of this video a link to this GitHub repository. For those who are non-technical, a GitHub repository is just a place where I can share information with you. This is what you'll see when you click on that link. Here is the table of contents of the sections that are to come. Here are the core tools that we're going to be leveraging in this video: N8N, Airtable, Dropbox, and JSON to video. There are some additional tools that we'll be presenting too, but I will suggest free workarounds for these ones in case you don't want to pay for them. So I'm going to be very intentional and conscientious of finance throughout. You do not want to be spending any more money than needed, right? N8N comes with a 2-week free trial. After that 2-week free trial elapses, you'll have to dish out about $20. If you don't want to pay that $20, there are additional measures you can take, but they get a little bit technical. The easiest one I would recommend is maybe try opening up a new account again, right? Rotating an email. Regarding Airtable, Airtable will be free, right? Airtable is a place where we can store data in nice table-like or spreadsheet-like structures. It's an amazing tool, as you'll soon see. Dropbox will be free. Dropbox gives you 2 gigs worth of storage for free. The reason why I like Dropbox is it gives you these links to your images and videos that are compatible with a lot of other systems. And then there's JSON to Video. So JSON to Video is a media stitching platform. So it allows you to take media components and put them together and produce videos. For example, you can have maybe some music sitting in Dropbox, right? Like an MP3 file. And you can also have some images sitting in Dropbox as like PNG files, right? And you can use JSON to Video to stitch them all together. There are some free alternatives to JSON to Video, but using them gets a little bit technical. So in the name of simplicity, this is what I'm suggesting we use. So let's zoom out for a second. It's good to keep things simple and digestible. We have a lot to get through, and I don't want to overwhelm you at any point. The core principle behind how I'm going to present this tooling is I would like us to keep our costs, right? Our investment to an absolute minimum. That's going to be my principle. But the pricing mechanisms of some of these platforms will require you to pay some money or me to pay some money eventually. A lot of variables are at play here, but to give you one scenario, if you follow along with this video and you complete it right within a 2-week period, and all of the media that you produce is very short, right? And you don't burn through any of the free credits or run into any paywalls on any of these platforms, you probably could follow along for almost for free. But some of these platforms require you to pay. For example, OpenAI, their API requires you to pay, I think, at least $5 or $10. You shouldn't need any more than that for what we're doing in this video. Leonardo AI, for example, they also charge you to use the API. We're going to be using the APIs of these platforms a lot because that's going to allow us to easily combine how we use them together if that's what we want regarding our creative vision. And Fal AI can be quite expensive, as you'll soon see. So once again, my recommendation is to make the generative media as short as possible while you're learning, right? Once you master this stuff, you'll be aware of the costs. Once again, I got your back. I got my back. I'm going to do my absolute best. You understand my intentions. Now let's have some fun. We're going to start by setting up Airtable. You can see that I've signed up, and this is what my dashboard looks like. Once you visit your dashboard, you can organize all of the data that you store in Airtable into these things called workspaces. You can see that I've created a workspace called Advanced AI Video Automation, AAIVA. You can create a workspace by clicking this button here, and after you have your workspace created, you can start creating what are called bases or databases within your workspace. So if I click this button and then click this, right, it says start with a blank app and build your ideal workflow. This is probably cool too. I've never used it, but anyhow, we're going to start from scratch. And the name of our database will be called AAIVA as well. Keep it simple. So our workspace is called AAIVA, and our database within our workspace is called AAIVA. You could name them whatever you want. I'm just going to be following my intuition as we go through this. Now that we have our base or database created, we can now create tables within our database. We're going to be creating 3 tables. We're going to be creating a scripts table, a segments table, and a miscellaneous table. In the scripts table, we're going to be storing scripts for videos that we're going to be creating, right? And each row of the scripts table is going to be a different script. In the segments table, we're going to be breaking up our script into parts, right? When you create a movie, each movie, right, has many parts or many scenes, right? We're going to break up a script, and each chunk or segment of that script will be stored in the segments table. And for shits and giggles, it's actually going to be really interesting. We have a third table that I'm calling the miscellaneous table. On the miscellaneous table, we're going to store random things, as you'll soon see. So Airtable by default creates this table, right? Let's rename this to be called scripts. And let's delete all of the columns except for the first column. Right? I deleted every column except for the first one. If I try to delete the first one, it doesn't let me, right? You need to have some data inside of a table. So let's edit this first column by right-clicking and then clicking Edit Field. And if you read closely, you can see this little message that says, this is the table's primary field. The name is meant to be a short, unique representation of each record in your table. When you have a table, right, you're going to define the columns of that table. Once again, a table is just like a spreadsheet. It's a series of cells, right? You can store value, right, in each cell of that table. First, you define your columns. The columns will restrict the type of data that you can store in that column, right? For example, this column, right, the data type is single line text. So we can store single lines of text in each cell of this column in this spreadsheet. If we change this column type to be, let's say, a date, then when we're storing values in the cells of that column, they have to adhere to this specific date format, right? Anyhow, we're going to rename this first column to be called ID, right? Another thing too is when you're creating a table, one of the columns has to act as the unique identifier for every row in that table. So let me just show you this so it doesn't sound any more confusing than it needs to be. So we're going to make this an auto number, which means that as we create rows in this table, we're going to have an integer, right? A number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., right? 6, 7, 8, right? We're going to have an integer be assigned to that row. And as we create a row, that integer is going to increment by 1. So if I click save, you can see we had 3 rows in this table. Row 1 is going to be ID number 1. Row 2 is going to be ID number 2. Row 3 is going to be ID number 3. If you create a new row, right, it automatically gets assigned the next integer in that auto number sequence. And this is going to be our primary column or our primary key. And the values in the cells of this column have to be unique. This allows us to identify each row of this table in an unambiguous way. Let's now create the remaining 4 columns that we're going to be using for the scripts table in this video. So we're going to add a long text column type, and we're going to call that script. And by the way, we can always edit this stuff later, so don't worry if you accidentally, specify something that you don't want. You can always edit it later. The next column is going to be attachment column. And we're going to call this spoken audio. And you'll see how this column works later. It's pretty amazing. The next column is going to be a URL column type. And this is going to be spoken audio URL. And the last column is going to be a checkbox column. And this is going to be called active. Right? This hopefully is pretty straightforward, but anyhow, let's say that we have one script here, script 1, script 2, script 3. And when we want to work on turning this script into some video format, right? We're going to convert our script into a video. That's pretty much the transformation from a technical standpoint of what we're doing here. We have to tell the system which script we want to be generated by toggling on this active column. So if you were to check this row, right, when we're using the other aspects of the system, this is going to be the input script that gets fed in. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's set up the second table, the segments table. So let's start from scratch and call this table segments. And let's delete all the columns except for the first column. And let's rename this first column. Let's call this ID, and the type of this column will be auto number. And let's run through the creation of the remaining columns. We're going to add 12 more. Let's create a single line text column type. This is going to be called script segment. The next column will be a duration column type. The duration format is going to be this format. And this will be called start time. The next column will be a duration column type. Format will be this. And it will be called the end time column. The next column will be an attachment column. This will be called image. The next column will be a URL column. It will be called the image URL. The next column will be a long text column type. It'll be called image prompt. And we're going to create another attachment column. This will be called video. Then we'll add a URL column type called video URL. Then we will add a long text column type called video prompt. Then we will add a link to another record column type, and this is going to reference our scripts table. And we do not want to allow linking to multiple records in our scripts table because one segment is going to belong to one script, or one part of a video will only belong to one video. So let's create the field, and the column that is going to act as the foreign key or lookup field is going to be the ID column. And that allows us to uniquely identify a particular row in our scripts table, right? Perfect. And after I have that created, let me just edit this again. I'm going to call this full script. Yeah, I'll just call it like that. Once again, you can call these things whatever you want. I'm just following my intuition. Finally, let's add 2 more columns. A checkbox column called Make Video. And then the final column will be a single line text, and this will be called Video Render Request ID. Okay, so I could be pedantic and explain what each of these columns does, but I think it's probably going to be more enjoyable for you if we move along and you learn what each of them does as we move through the rest of this video. So I'll leave it there. And the last table that we're going to create before we jump into N8N is going to be the miscellaneous table. And same vibe. Let's delete all of the columns except for the first one. And let's rename this to be called ID. Make this an auto number. And then we're going to add 3 columns. So we're going to add a single line text. This column is going to be the name of whatever thing we're keeping track of. And then we're going to add an attachment column. This is going to be called images. And then finally, we're going to add a single line text column called init image ID. So in this table, we're able to store things. We can call them whatever we want. And here we can put images of those things. And we're going to be able to use this to fine tune or customize the images that get generated for our videos. You'll see what this means later. Now for the scary part. This AI shit is nothing but a facade. I hope you know that, right? At the core is human intention, is human vision, right? We hope this is clear. Now it's time to write a script, right? This is going to be the script that I'm going to write. My little dick in your mouth all night long. Respect God over everything. Provide overwhelming value to others. Pay back all debts. Live abundantly and free. Dream and live bigger than anyone has ever done so before, right? That's the script of my movie, right? Sort of like motivational. I don't know about the little dick part, but everything else is pretty motivational. But yeah, I guess I'm insecure about that, so I have to say that. But my dick is not that small. I have a nice dick. Anyhow, this should not go in the video. But fuck this shit. I don't give a fuck, bro. I'm trying to get to the top. I'm at the top. I made it, bitch. Fuck y'all niggas, man. This is me, nigga. Okay, real shit. Do not copy me. The underlying message of that previous passage was that you should be yourself and be authentically who you are. That stuff is going to forever, until the end of time, be more powerful than all of this AI shit combined. This AI shit is stupid as fuck when you really zoom out, right? It's really an amplifier. That's how I look at it. It's amplifying what you are. If you're trash, you're going to produce trash with AI. If you're good, you're going to produce good with AI, right? That's really what it comes down to in my mind. Okay. So for the creatively challenged people watching, this is a prompt that I suggest you provide to your favorite LLM. If you're that inept, right? Or if the AI has taken over that much of your mind already. Let's see what it comes out with. Right? You can see here that $1 billion can't even touch what I vomit out of my mouth in 20 seconds. So let's see how far we can actually get with this. Some of these platforms might have content moderation features that might flag this. I don't know why they would, but I could also see how this could be interpreted negatively, but I'm not a negative person. Know that about me. Intention, right? Words. Come on, man. We're better than this, right? Alrighty, we have finally made it to N8N. I have cleared out my account completely so that I'm forced to show you every step of how I set this up. And let's jump in by creating a workflow. I'm going to be creating all of these workflows in a folder in my N8N account called AAI VA for organizational purposes. And you can do the same. Let's start by adding a Airtable node. And the exact node we're going to add is a search records node. And we're going to need to authenticate our N8N account with Airtable. And you can see some tips here as to how to do that. But anyhow, I'm going to show you. Here, if we come to Airtable, if we come back, excuse me, to our dashboard and pop open this top right menu, we should see an option that says Builder Hub. And here is where we can create a token that we can give to N8N that will allow it to interact with our Airtable account. So I'm going to call this AAI VA, of course. Duh. And these are the scopes or permissions that we need to give this token. And the base we're going to be dealing with is obviously AAI VA. Hopefully you can see the pattern. This is the token. And if we paste that here and save, we should be authenticated. And that looks good. We can now configure this node, right? So we can now see our base. And within this base, we have 3 tables. And this is the one that we want to search through. And this is the little formula that we're going to put here. This is how we pull in our active script. And I think that's it. So if I click test step, right, here we have our script. And the next node, right, so if I click out, and the way that we're going to do this is by building an HTTP request ourselves. So N8N comes with an HTTP request node. And here is the location on the internet where we can find the HTTP request that we need, right? So what we're going to be doing is sending some text to some AI model. We're not going to be hosting it. We're going to be using a model provided by ElevenLabs, right? And this will make a lot of sense in a short moment, right? So if we copy this and then come back to N8N, you can see this little button right here. We can use to import curl statements into the node, right? And you can see if it works properly, we'll have a lot of work done for us. Not all of the work, but most of the work done for us. For example, this needs to be updated. This is not correct. I think everything is correct though, other than this. So when I share these automations with you, I don't want to expose my keys. If I store my keys as authentication headers, N8N will not include them in the workflow templates when you share them with other people. Pro tip. Anyhow, so let's click generic credential type. Then we're going to click header auth. You'll learn what all of these mean over time, by the way. Don't stress out about it. It's just different ways of providing an authentication token in an HTTP request to some other system. So let's create a new credential. And what I'm going to do is come back here. And this is the name of the header that we need to provide. Right? For the value, what we need to do is create a API key on the ElevenLabs dashboard. So here I am on ElevenLabs.io. I'm logging in. I think you can find the API keys in my account. And let's create a new API key. We'll call this one AAIA. Duh. And we have to tell ElevenLabs what we're going to be using this API key for. So we're going to be using it for text to speech. And by the way, if you don't want to use ElevenLabs, just find a microphone, maybe your phone, right? And just record yourself. That honestly will be probably better than what this AI system will spit out for you. It depends on what you're trying to do, of course. But you can get quite far with your own voice and your own mind. Never forget that. So here we have this API key. I'm going to copy it and provide it here. And when we click this, it got saved. And moment of truth, we have to test this request and see if everything is working. Right, that looks promising. So if I click view.
The first move is what sets everything in motion.
So true. So true. Next up, we're going to upload this audio to Dropbox. So if we click plus and add in a Dropbox node, let's click the upload a file node. And we don't have a credential for Dropbox. This node supports OAuth 2, which is a really easy way to connect systems together through a browser, as you'll soon see. So we probably should click app folder, but in the name of simplicity, I'll just go with full Dropbox. This means that N8N is able to read every file in our Dropbox account. If we click app folder, we can restrict it to only be able to read certain folders within our Dropbox account, but I don't want to make this any more complicated than it already has become. Okay, so full Dropbox, connect my account, right? And this obviously assumes that you have an account on Dropbox, right? Make sure you're logged in. And once again, Dropbox should be free, right? Dropbox gives you 2 gigs of storage for free, which is more than enough for what we're doing here. So after you have your account created on Dropbox, when you kick off the OAuth flow, that's what this is called, it should pick up your account and you can click allow. And that will send a token from Dropbox back to N8N. And N8N will store that token for us, right? And we'll be able to interact with Dropbox from N8N. Make sense? And we're going to take this file right here and upload it to Dropbox. And I'm going to create a folder at the root. Guess what it's going to be called? AAIVA. And we currently have nothing in this folder. So if we come back here, right, we can put a file path here, AAIVA, and then we're going to store this file, which is an MPEG file, which means MP3. And we'll say test.mp3. We have to check this on, right? And then make sure this has the same name as the binary file that gets fed into this node. I think that should be good. So if we click test step, that looks like it worked. And if we come back to Dropbox, you can see the file is here.
The first move is what sets everything in motion.
Beautiful. All right, the next node is going to be quite interesting. So after we upload our file to Dropbox, we want to get a link to that file in Dropbox. And unfortunately for us, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, Dropbox does not have a node on N8N for getting a link to the file, right? So we're going to have to build a custom Dropbox API call. The way that we do that is by coming over to dropbox.com/developers. And then let's come over to the app console and let's create a new app. This app is going to give us full access to the Dropbox API, not just the built-in methods that N8N offers to us. And I don't know why this is an option because we have to select it. And for step 2, we should be using the app folder approach, but for simplicity, let's just go with the full Dropbox option. And the name of this app is going to be, guess what? Bet you didn't guess that. Haha. So now that we have this created, we're going to have to copy in some of these values that we see here into N8N, along with some other values that can be found on several other pages on Dropbox's website. I've outlined all of the information that you're about to see in the accompanying GitHub repo, so take a look there. So what we're going to do is exit out of our current workflow temporarily. And let's save this, sure. And let's come over to the credentials tab, and we're going to create a new credential. The type of credential we're going to create is an OAuth 2 API credential. OAuth 2 API. There we go. Click continue. And we're going to need to fill in these empty fields that you see here, right? And let's fill in this one first. So the value for the authorization URL is going to be this. The value for the access token URL is going to be this. The value for the client ID can be found on the app console. So this app key field is the client ID. Paste that in there. The client secret can be found on the app console as well. This app secret field is the client secret. So let's copy that. The scopes that we're going to be using can be outlined on the permissions tab of this app in the app console. So we're going to need sharing write and sharing read permissions. And then we have to submit this to save it. So let's copy that and come back to N8N. And we have to provide this scope or permission, followed by a space, and then this scope or permission. And the final value we have to provide is this one. And here is the value that we need to put. Bingo. So I think we're almost ready to test this out. We have to do, I think, a few more things. So we have to copy this value, come back to the app console, right? The app we created has settings for outlining the redirect URIs. We have to add that here. Let's rename this so that we can easily identify it moving forward. I'm going to call this Dropbox OAuth 2 refresh token cred AAIVA. So if everything is configured properly, this should work when we connect our account to Dropbox. And this looks promising. Let's click continue. And then let's click allow. There we go. That looks like it worked. So let's close this and then come back to our workflow. And what we'll do is add another node. This is going to be an HTTP request node. And we're going to import a curl that comes from another section of Dropbox's documentation site. So this is the exact link for reference. And this is the API call for creating a link to a file that's sitting in Dropbox, right? So if you copy this curl, which is the curl we need, right? I think it won't paste into AnyDent properly. So I've cleaned it up, so to speak, in the accompanying README, FYI. But you can also figure out what you need to specify by looking at those docs. So anyhow, I'm going to paste in that curl that represents the create shared link with settings API call. I'm going to click import, and that should configure this AnyDent node for the most part. And once again, we do not want to specify any auth headers in plain text here. We want to provide our authentication through this field here. This is just a best practice. So let's click generic credential type, and then OAuth 2 API, and then we should see the credential that we created, right? The file in Dropbox that we want to create a link for is sitting in AAIVA/test.mp3, if you recall. So if everything works, we should see an output here containing a link to the file. Bingo. So you can see this link here. If we copy that, load it, here we see our MP3 file.
The first move is what sets everything in motion.
Perfect. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We're going to add another node. This node is going to be a edit fields node, sometimes called a set node. And we're going to be adding a field like so. And the name of this field is going to be direct Dropbox URL. And the value is going to be this. Once again, all of this is found in the accompanying README. Pretty much what we're doing here is taking this link and switching this last parameter value to be a 1. So if we specify a 1, it downloads the file onto our computer. If we specify a 0, right, it loads the file within this application that's provided by Dropbox. What we want is to download the file, right? So as you can see here, we're switching out that last param to be a 1, right? And once we have all that set up, let's clean this up and zoom out. And the last node is going to be an Airtable node. And this one is going to be an update record node. We're going to use that same access token we created earlier. And we're going to update a record in this AAIVA base. We're going to update our script, right, which is sitting in the scripts table. And we're going to match on the ID. There's also an internal ID that Airtable provides, but anyhow, let's just stick to the primary field that we created earlier, if you recall. And we're going to be uploading our audio and our spoken audio URL. And we want to keep this record as active. So I'm going to run through this to not be too pedantic, but you'll see everything that happens. Let's go. So the first thing is we want to put this value here and switch this to expression. And this is going to reference the prior node. So this one, I believe. Get linked to file in Dropbox. Yeah. Save. So let's click that button and see what's going on here. So yeah, that makes sense. All right. This looks weird, but I think it's correct. And when you're using these low-code automation tools, sometimes you have to run the automation to actually see the values. So let's run it again from the top. What happened here? That makes sense. So we already have a file at this path. So we need to make it dynamic, which we will do right now. So let's click into this node, and we're not going to hard code this. We're going to take our script that we wrote, and then this should be a unique value. So let's do double curly braces, switch this to an expression. Inside here, we're going to do date.now. And that's going to give us a unique value for this MP3 file, because time always marches on, right? So I think that should fix our issue. And when we generate the share link, we have to reference, and then hopefully we're good to go. So let's save that, test it. Great. We're almost there. So let's come back to our base. And when this works, we should see a URL here. And we should also see the audio here in a way that we can play it. Once again, if you don't want to use ElevenLabs, you can just drag a recording of you reciting your script onto this cell, and you can skip that step. Honestly, it might even be better than using ElevenLabs. Let's be honest here. But anyhow, let's just finish this up and move on to the next chapter of this saga. So I think what happened here is we didn't provide the ID of our row. So I think that's good. By the way this is outlined is as you move from top to bottom, you're going further back in the automation, right? So our first node was the node that pulled in our script, right? And we're referencing it by name. Same way that we're referencing this node right here, right? Over here. So save that and run it one more time. And then let's come over here. And if this worked, we should see values here. There we go. See? But it didn't have the URL here. Spoken audio URL. This should be the direct Dropbox URL. Let me run it one more time. Great. And now we have our URL and our file.
Respect God over everything, provide overwhelming value to others, pay back all debts, live abundantly, and free dream and live bigger than anyone has ever done so before.
Something like that, right? So that does it for our first automation. Let's call this text to speech and move on. Next up, we're going to take that audio version of our script and split it up into parts by leveraging AI. The exact model that we're going to be using to do this, when I say model, I mean AI system, right? The exact model we're going to be using to do this is called Whisper. So we're going to get started by coming out of the previous workflow that we worked on. That's available in the accompanying GitHub repo, by the way. And let's create a new workflow. The first node of this second workflow is actually going to be an Airtable search records node, which we can copy from the first workflow. So if I duplicate the current page, then come back, then pop open the first workflow, this is the node that we need. So I'm going to copy that, come over to the second workflow, and paste that in, Command C, Command V, and let's move this over here. And this is going to be a manual trigger. I don't know why it moved back over here. Anyhow, let's connect this. And we should have started doing this in the previous workflow, but let's start it now. Let's start naming our nodes so they're very intuitive. So we're getting our script here. And if we test this out, we can see our script and the audio file sitting in Airtable. And we also have another copy of the audio file sitting in Dropbox. The next node is going to be an HTTP request node. And we're simply going to download the file from Dropbox. If we test this out, we should see the raw data of that MP3 file. And that's the case. The last little tweak we have to make to this node is we have to add a response option and make the response format file. This is a technicality with any-to-n. Anyhow, you'll see what this does for us in the next node. So let's close this. Let's be OCD and let's call this download spoken audio. Download spoken audio, right? Making this as intuitive as possible for you. So let's save that. And then we're going to add the next node. The next node is also going to be an HTTP request node. And this is the node that we're going to use to segment our audio. The platform that we're going to use for doing this, once again, is going to be OpenAI's Whisper API. And I have all of this inside of the accompanying repository. But just to show you it here, this is the documentation for the Whisper or speech-to-text API that OpenAI offers. You can access this at platform.openai.com. Make sure that you have an account there. You will need to load up some credits. You're probably going to need to pay $5, maybe a little bit over that. I think they have a minimum amount that you can pay for in credits. Once you have credits loaded, that's going to be more than enough for this entire video. I doubt we'll spend more than $1 or $2, but let's see. Ultimately, it depends on how much data you're processing. Anyhow, if we scroll down, we'll see this curl, right? And if we scroll down further, eventually we'll come to, just taking a close look, 1 second. Yeah, this is the one we want, right? So Whisper has the ability to give you a transcript of the audio that you pipe through it, and it'll put timestamps on that transcript in the same format as the duration columns that we have in Airtable, if you recall. So this is along the lines of what we want. We don't want the timestamps on each word, so we'll delete this, right? But this, generally speaking, is what we're going to use. And we're going to have to set up a header according to this format. So let's jump in. I have the exact curl in the accompanying repo for reference. And if we copy it and come over here, paste it in, vroom, vroom, we can have most of this node set up for us. We will have to tweak some things. Let's start with setting up the auth credential. So if we delete this plain text header, and if we come over to the authentication field, let's select generic credential type. And we're going to do a header auth. And we probably should have labeled this header that we created in the prior workflow. So let's do that now, just to stay organized. So let's come back out of this second tab, come over to the credentials tab. And this header was the one we created for ElevenLabs. So let's call this header ElevenLabs AAIVA auth. As long as you can easily identify it, that's the most important thing. So I'm going to tag all of the headers we create for the most part with AAIVA. Great. So let's come back here and let's save and let's reload. I don't know if we had to reload, but anyhow, we did. So now we can see that header labeled in a much clearer fashion. So this is OpenAI, not ElevenLabs. So we're going to create a new credential. The information we have to provide in these fields can be found here. And then we're going to have to come over to our API keys page and provision an API key. So this is the URL. It's in your platform dashboard. Once you create an account, click this button and let's call this API key AAIVA and select the project that you want to associate it with. And then click create secret key and copy this into N8N. So this header name is going to be authorization. And then the value, I'm going to switch this to expression so you can see what I'm writing. It's going to be bearer space, and then you paste in that API key. And then let's name this OpenAI AAIVA cred. And that looks good. Let's save that. And then I think we're almost ready to test this. So I think this is the last thing to do. So let's execute all of the nodes prior to this one inside of the workflow. And you can see we get this data field, and we can reference it here like so. And let's run this and see what we get back. Great. So you can see we get our audio version of our script broken up into segments, right? And this is an interesting thing. You can actually also send a prompt to Whisper and give it some instructions as to how you want it to break up your audio file. These are AI models, so they don't always work as you expect, but this will have an effect. Anyhow, that's working. Let's move on to the next node. In the next node, we're going to search for any existing segments that are stored in Airtable. And we haven't done that yet. So let me explain from a high level what's happening. So first, we're going to get some script, right? We're going to convert that script into an audio format. Then we're going to use Whisper to break that script up into segments. And then we're going to store those segments into Airtable. But if we already have segments for our script in Airtable, we want to delete those ones and then replace them with the new ones. Make sense? So here is what this looks like. So let's add an Airtable search records node. And we're going to be pulling records from this base and from the segments table. And the segments that we're looking for are the segments whose full script ID equals the primary key of the script in the scripts table. Hopefully I said that correctly. So if we run this, nothing was returned, but it looked like it worked. Yeah, that does look correct. So we will move on, but first, of course, let's rename this, and let's rename this node as well. Excuse me about that. So this is going to be get segments, and we forgot to rename this node. This node is going to be generate transcription. Great. Let's save that and move on. The next node is going to be a code node. I like this node. It lets us run arbitrary code. And then let's replace this code snippet with the following JavaScript code. Pretty much what we're doing here is checking to see if any segments were returned. If there weren't any, then this is the object that will spit out. If there are segments, then we spit out this array, right? Which is the prior segments, and then the segments. And this will make sense shortly. So let's run a quick test to make sure this code node is working as expected. So let's run our workflow. And interesting, it stopped here. So let's see what's going on. So we don't have any segments. This does make sense. I think what we have to do though is come over to the settings and specify this checkbox or turn on this switch. If we test this again, now we get some output, right? So if there's no segments, we get an empty list spit out, and that should trigger our code node now. Bingo. Right? And let's take a look at what's going on. So that makes sense. We don't have any prior segments, right? And here are the segments that were currently generated by Whisper. Perfect. So let's move on now. And the next node we're going to add is going to be an if node. You can see on the right side of this if node, there is two outputs. There's a true branch and a false branch. What's going to happen is we're going to test if we have any prior segments. If we do have prior segments, then we're going to come into the true branch, the top branch, right? If we don't have any prior segments, we're going to come to the false branch, the bottom branch. If we don't have any prior segments, all we need to do is upload the new segments into Airtable. If we do have prior segments, we have to delete the old ones. And once those are deleted, we can upload the new ones. Make sense? Let's get it. So let's pop open this if node again and configure it. So let's drag this over. If we have prior segments, then we're going to go to the top branch, right? So if we have prior segments, count will be greater than 0. So if we test this, because we don't have any prior segments, we should go to the bottom branch. And that's the case. You can see that, right? It's green on the bottom branch. So let's run it, right? Bottom branch. So let's flesh out the bottom branch and then we'll work on the top branch. So here's what the bottom branch is going to look like. So the next node we'll add is going to be called a merge node. This node allows you to plug in the outputs of multiple nodes prior in the workflow and then choose which one to pass on to the next node. The mode of this node that we'll go with is going to be choose branch, and the branch that we'll use as output will be the second one. This is going to make sense shortly. So you can see this node takes multiple inputs, and then on the output side, there's one output. We need to choose which input gets fed through as the output. The input that we want in this case is going to be the output of the generate transcription node. Beautiful. All right, you can see that. Something like that. Let's clean this up. Well, you can see what's going on, right? Anyhow, after the merge node comes the split out node. Put that here, connect that. There we go. Let's drag the segments to this, right? You can see there's multiple items in this list. What we want to do is split them out. So the nodes after the split out node are going to get executed once for each item in the segments list or array, right? So now that that's connected, let's save that. Let's test this. There we go. Now it works. Bingo. So you see 3 items are getting spit out by the split out node, one for each segment of our script. And the last thing that we need to do regarding this bottom branch is we need to upload each of those segments to Airtable. So let's create a record. So we're going to be creating a record in the segments table in the AAIVA base. Here are all the columns of the segments table. So for each segment, we need to populate as much of this stuff as we have available at the current moment. So let's start with script segment. So that's the script segment, right? This is the first part of our overall script. The start time of this segment is going to be here. The end time is going to be here. We do need to reference the full script ID. Why don't I see that option here? If I come back to Airtable, come over to segments. Yeah, we have our full script column. Why isn't that showing here? I think it's here. So here we have to reference the current script. So if we come all the way back to the first node, so let's come to the get script node, and this segment is going to be a member of this script, right? Script with ID 1. Let's test this out. It says it expects an array, but we got 1. No problem. Let's make that an array. Value 1 is not a valid record ID. So I guess what we have to do is not use our ID, but I guess we have to use the built-in ID that Airtable generates, which is this one. So if we test this, that looks almost there. I think we have to surround this in quotes, quote, quote. Let's test that again. Bingo. So if we come over to Airtable, there we go. See it? So let's delete these segments. And you can see they belong to script 1. Let's delete these and test it one more time. So let's run the workflow. That looks like it worked. And we see the segments here. And if we run it again, we should have segments, right? And we should come to the top branch, the true branch. Bingo. You can see we're on the true branch. So let's flesh out the true branch, and then this workflow will be finished. Okay, the first thing we're going to do in the true branch is add a merge node. And the mode of this merge node is going to be choose branch. And we will spit out, I believe, the first branch for this one. Yeah, because it'll look more visually appealing. So let's put that input below on this top merge node. And the other input is going to be coming from the get segments node. Remember, we have segments now, so we need to delete the segments that we find here. So the next thing to do is add an Airtable delete a record node. And we're going to be deleting data from the AAIVA base and from the segments table. And the record ID will be given to us. So hopefully this works. There we go. So this is the ID we want, right? This gets passed from this node through the merge node into the delete record node. Fingers crossed this works. So before I test it, let's take a look at Airtable. We have 3 records here, right? And if this works, we should have no records afterwards. Let's save that and run the automation. says it worked. You should have nothing here. So if I reload, nothing in the segments table, right? As expected. Great. And then what we'll do is try like this. Copy. Paste. And then let's plug this into the bottom node. And then we're going to need the input from the transcript generation node. And because we flip this around, the output has to be the top node now. And then we split out the segments, and then we add them to Airtable. So let's save that. Clean this up. And let's test it. So just take a look at what's going on here before we test this. So we have nothing in here. So we're going to run it once. We should then have 3 records. Because we have no prior segments, we're going to hit the bottom branch. Then we're going to run it again. And it's going to delete the prior segments and then add the new ones. So assuming both times we run this, Whisper generates 3 segments. We should have 3 segments in the segments table after running this twice. So let's run it once. We hit the bottom branch. We have our segments. And let's run it again. Here, yeah, the segments got deleted, as you could see, and the new segments were added. And you can see the IDs, right, are in line with what I'm saying. So this is fantastic. We have completed this workflow. We're going to add one other little workflow that we're going to build right now. It's not going to be as labor intensive as this one. This next little helper workflow is what I'm going to call it, is going to validate that the segments line up with the full length of the audio version of the script. Okay, so let's call this segment spoken audio. Great. And let's come back. Beautiful. And let's create another workflow. This one is going to be called helper validate segment durations. And we're going to start this workflow with 2 nodes that we've already built. So I already have a second tab open here. Let's come to the workflows. I have the workflows that we're working on organized into this AAIVA folder. And I think we can find the nodes we need here. So this is the first node. You want to pull in the script. And the second node is going to be this one. You want to pull in the segments. And let's set this up. And this has to be a trigger. Hook that up. Clean this up. Save. And the next node is going to be a code node. And let's replace this JavaScript with the following JavaScript snippet. What we're doing here is making sure that the segment ends at the same time that the next segment starts. This is going to make sure that when we line up all the segments on a timeline, they're going to be the same length as the full audio version of our script. So let's test this out now. Perfect. On the other side of this code node, we should have our timestamps for each segment as we're expecting. And we can then add an Airtable update record node. We're going to be updating data in the AAIVA base in the segments table. And let's match on our ID just for fun. So we're getting the data from each segment fed through the code model. So we can use that here. Fed through the code node, excuse me. Did I say code model? And the whole point of the code node is to fix the start time and the end time in case it's not as we need it to be. A lot of times Whisper does what we want, right? It makes sure that each segment ends when the next one starts, but sometimes it depends on your audio. I guess depends on the model, but it'll leave silent gaps between each transcribed part of your script. And when you line those up, it's not going to be the full length of the script, right? The audio version of the script. This will make sense shortly. And I think that's good for now. So let's test this. So we have now completed part 5. We've made it to the midpoint of this journey. And I did say we were going to be going deep on a number of levels. And now I recommend you take a break, drink lots of water, eat a nice meal, go outside, exercise, get a nice workout in. And when you're recharged, come back and wrap up the second half, which is going to take us to the finish line. Peace for now.